We wanted to explore whether a nutrition transition is happening in Zambia. We know that nutrition is changing all over the world, and while hunger and stunting overall are reducing globally, obesity and chronic diseases are rising. And we know that diets are changing too, so broad changes seen at different rates, but in all regions now, include a decrease in consumption of coarse grains and staple cereals and pulses, an increase in animal foods, sugar, salt, fats and oils, refined grains and processed foods, and depending on the population that you're studying, either an increase or a decrease in fruits and vegetable consumption. And so this pattern of dietary changes and associated nutrition and health outcomes have been described as a nutrition transition from traditional diets to a more uniform global regime and altered nutrition and health outcomes. And many of the known nutrition transition drivers are in place in Zambia today. So agriculture is vital to Zambia's economy and culture. It accounts for around 80% of employment, and a majority of food consumed in Zambia is grown in Zambia, largely at subsistence level. Zambia's population has almost tripled since 1970. Fertility is still at 6 children per woman in Zambia, so a population growth rate of about 2% a year. Zambia is already more urbanized than many African countries, with a high urban population of around 40% for decades. And national income has risen quite swiftly over the past 10 years, so GDP's increased at about 5 to 7% annually. But we also know that income isn't shared equally, so income inequality in Zambia is increasing. The Gini index of inequality shows Zambia ranking as one of the most unequal countries in the world at 141st out of 187 countries. In terms of global food industry reach, Zambia's first supermarket opened in 1995, and the country currently has 44 supermarkets in urban areas. It's seen as a growth market for supermarkets. And finally, emerging agribusiness focuses on 5 key commodity value chains, so maize, which is Zambia's staple food, horticulture and livestock for higher income markets, and cotton and soya, which are the main cash crops. So this is just to say that both supply and demand side characteristics have changed in Zambia over the past few decades, and Zambia has a particular set of circumstances currently which make it a candidate for undergoing this nutrition transition. So how does all this affect food and nutrition in Zambia? Well, we don't really know, and data, as Anna has pointed out, are hard to come by. So for this study, we took a pragmatic approach to data. We combined multiple types and sources and scales of information. So to assess national food availability, we used production data captured in FAO food balance sheets. To assess food access, we had a data set that captured food prices in urban centres in Zambia. To assess household food consumption, we used a data set that captured household food expenditures periodically. To assess individual diets, we looked at several different surveys that have captured minimum dietary diversity in children. And then to assess nutrition and health, we used data from various public surveys capturing anthropometry and chronic disease in Zambia. So these various data points are synthesized narratively in the paper, and we wanted just to start to paint a picture of food and nutrition change in the country. So first, we assessed changing food supply in Zambia using FAO food balance sheets, and this is a picture of changes in amounts of different foods available in Zambia since 1971, calculated as kilograms per person per year. And to point out from this is that availability of pulses, fish, milk, fruits and vegetables reduced from already low levels over the past 4 decades, and there was a near doubling of availability of fats and oils and also starchy roots. So also to point out from this, according to these figures, only about 10 to 12 grams of fruits and vegetables are available per person per day, and that's against an international recommendation of around 400 grams. So even with the limitations in data collection that we know about with food balance sheets, which misses a lot of home production, this is extremely low. And then in terms of calories available from different food groups, just to cut the data in a different way, 3/4 of calories available are from cereals and starchy roots, so largely maize and cassava. And nutrient-rich fruits and vegetables and pulses and eggs and meat and fish provide very few of the calories available. So the nutrient-rich foods have really barely kept pace or fallen behind population growth, while starches and fats, but also chicken and eggs, have leapt ahead. So in terms of availability of food, Zambia is not really heading towards diverse and healthy diets, and particularly in terms of fruit and vegetable availability. So how has changing supply and demand affected food prices? Well, we have some limited food price data collected from urban centres in Zambia between 1996 and 2015. And looking at food price change over time, most foods have become less expensive in real terms, with maize and vegetable oils and chicken reducing the most. And fish and eggs are the only foods that have become less affordable. This data isn't comprehensive, and it doesn't show differences, for instance, between rural and urban areas, but it does give us a sense that food prices have reduced significantly over the past 2 decades for all but a few foods, including both nutritious and less nutritious foods. So likely this increases purchasing power, so many households can access more food, but that can be the nutrient-dense food that contributes to a healthy diet, or calorie-dense or salty or sugary food that can undermine diet quality. So changing supply and changing prices are 2 of the factors that influence changing household expenditures. And in 2015, maize and vegetables and meats and fish comprised the largest shares of household expenditures across the population. But this overall data obviously masks quite large differences between subpopulations. So for instance, rural populations spend a larger share of their income on most foods, particularly vegetables, than their urban counterparts. And then in terms of changes in expenditure, 1996 to today, overall households are spending more of their income on vegetables and also on fats and eggs and fish. With eggs and fish, that's likely because the prices have increased, but demand is inelastic. But with fats and vegetables, prices have reduced, so households appear to be buying more volume. And there's another presentation on these expenditures in the next session, which I'd urge you to go see if you're interested in that. So beyond what households are buying, we need to know about what people are eating. And because of known imbalances in the allocation of food between household members, we can't extrapolate directly from the household expenditures. So as a proxy for diet quality, we have some information on dietary diversity in children. In the most recent Zambia DHS, only 22% of children aged 6 to 23 months receive food from 4 or more food groups. And again, you can see here that the rural-urban divide and the role of income inequality is quite marked. So overall, dietary diversity is low in Zambia, meaning that diets are monotonous, they're dominated by staples, and they're generally low in nutrients. And then all these changes play out in nutrition indicators in Zambia. So firstly, hunger, or an outright lack of calories, remains a huge issue in Zambia, and production of calories is not keeping pace with population growth. So almost half of the population is going hungry at certain times of year. And then at the same time, child stunting, which is the major preoccupation of most development programs at the moment, is still very high in Zambia, but it has been falling back to pre-1990 levels over the past decade, so that's currently at around 40%. And the other major change you can see here is a doubling in the prevalence of overweight and obesity for women, from 12% in 2002 to 23% in 2014. And again, there's a geographic split, so 15% of women are overweight in rural areas and 32% in urban areas. And that change in nutrition outcomes is a key sign of the nutrition transition in some parts of the population. And it's backed up by cross-sectional data we have from 2008, showing very high levels of adult hypertension and some diabetes in the Zambian population. And we haven't been able to assess trends in time for those indicators because, again, we don't have the data. So we can say that Zambia has the classic double burden of malnutrition with high rates of child stunting and female overweight, particularly in certain provinces. So it's clear that a nutrition transition is happening in Zambia, but it's very difficult to uncover good data to say why and how it's happening. We've tried to show here the range of factors which have contributed, but as I say, more data is needed overall. So just very briefly in terms of policy responses, the Global Panel Foresight report in 2016 classified countries by their national income and urbanization, and created a typology of food policy responses. And given Zambia's place in the typology, Zambian food policy needs to focus more on improving diet quality and food safety, while not forgetting about hunger in critical rural areas. And notably, those policies speak to improving hunger and stunting just as much as to reducing overweight and NCDs. So it is a win-win if food systems can be changed, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that. Thank you.